Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with, if I could choose only one work by composer X, it would have to be work F. Well, fortunately for us, work F can also be an album, which is what it's got to be, I think, in this case. It really has to be. And you'll see why in a moment. The composer is Dvořák. Now, Dvořák, as I pointed out in my book on Dvořák, and many times here, was the most versatile genius of the second half of the 19th century. I mean, he was really comparable only to Mozart in all of the things he did well. He did symphonies, he did concertos, he did operas, he did choral works, big choral works, very wonderful big choral works. He did chamber music, tons and tons and tons of chamber music. Everything that he touched, he wrote masterpieces. It's that simple. Not everything he wrote was a masterpiece, of course, but there are masterpieces in every genre in which he worked, and he worked in just about every genre, and some that he made completely his own. And so, there's nothing quite comparable. And so to try and capture an artist of his range in a single work is, of course, impossible. But thankfully, the evil god Kankerzans said to me, Dave, he said, you can do an album, because I bargained for that really hard. I said, look, there's some composers, even if you say only one work by them could survive, it's really like half a work because they did so much so well. And Dvořák was definitely one of those. And so we have an album. And the album, get this, it actually tracks the pieces that you have been sort of primping for, pushing for most forcefully. The Eighth Symphony and the Cello Concerto, with Charles Munch, the Boston Symphony, and Gregor Piatigorsky playing the cello. Oh boy, thank God RCA issued these two things on a single disc. That's amazing. So, what do I need to say? First, the Cello Concerto. It's simply the greatest cello concerto ever written. The greatest Concello Concerto. Yes, it's a Concello Concerto. The greatest cello concerto anybody ever invented in the history of humanity. An incredible work. I don't need to tell you. Everybody kind of agrees with that. And if you don't agree, just stay away. I don't want to hear it. Just, absolutely beyond belief that anybody could disagree with that. It is the great romantic cello concerto. How's that if I qualify it a little? But it's amazing. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. That particular performance is a very good one. Everyone will have their favorite. We've talked about it endlessly. So we don't have to do it again. The point is that it's on the album, and thus it will survive. And the Eighth Symphony, Munch's performance of the Eighth Symphony is fabulous. It's absolutely wonderful. And the Eighth was Dvořák's most personal symphony. It was his favorite symphony. It's the least classical of all of his symphonies. And it's actually fascinating because, he began his career as a symphonist as a young sort of Wagnerian firebrand, who then gradually purged himself of those influences and began to write symphonies along classical models, which of course attracted the admiration and recognition of Brahms and other composers. And so by the time you get to 4, 5, 6, and 7, you're squarely in that classical model kind of mode, especially from number 5. Say 5, 6, and 7. But 8 is a completely unique structure and concept of the symphony that owes very little to classical forebears. It's really a variation work. And the variation is on a couple of sort of modules that you hear at the beginning of the symphony, and there are some others introduced along the way. Let me give you a sense of how it works, just a quick little example. The opening of the slow movement and the opening of the scherzo, which is a waltz, are the same. You may not realize that at first, but they are the same. They consist of 3 phrases in descending order, from high to low. The opening of the slow movement is da 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 da, ya da 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 da, yo do 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 do, like that, right? And the opening of the third movement is Da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da. Play them one after the other, and you'll hear exactly what's happening there. It's the same type of phrase, the same shape of the melody, the same direction of the melody. One is a variation of the other, but they are completely fresh and unique melodies, or so they appear when you hear them in the symphony. And that's Dvořák's technique throughout this work. It's extraordinary. It totally baffled Brahms. It's wonderful. He said something like, yes, it's gorgeous, it's wonderfully orchestrated, it's beautiful, it's lovely, but what is it? What is it? He was having like a nervous breakdown because Dvořák was so good at doing what Brahms was doing, but he also wanted to do his own thing. And so we really need to include a work that is purely and uniquely and utterly Dvořákian in structure and sound, alongside one that has more classical features and yet is the greatest of its type. So that's the album, the RCA recording with Charles Munch, the Boston Symphony, Piatigorsky doing the Dvořák Cello Concerto, and Dvořák's Eighth Symphony. Take that, Cancrozans. We have the Dvořák Ultimate worthy of preservation disc, and it just goes to show, Cancrozans, that if there is so much great stuff by this guy, we gotta have the rest of it. We just have to. We have to. You can't destroy everything else the man wrote. You just can't. I mean, the other option for this program, frankly, which it was hard, was the last two piano trios, the F minor trio and the Dumke trio, for the same reason as this program, because you have a very classically shaped work, the F minor trio, and you have the Dumke trio, which is entirely original and could have been written by nobody else in any similar fashion, and they're equally amazing. So Dvořák did that more than once. And we have to be able to savor it in its totality, to be able to explore the richness of this unbelievable legacy. So there you go. Keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.